May 31st, 1950. At the state court in Prague, a trial begins against 13 people accused of hating the new communist regime and working for Western spy agencies, allegedly planning terrorist acts and a coup. The supposed leader of this sabotage group is this woman, who at first glance seems very gentle. 48-year-old Milada Horáková. Few people at the time realized that the coming days will bring a staged show with a pre-written script and predetermined, brutal sentences. That they will witness the first political show trial in Czechoslovakia. And that Milada Horáková, through the courage with which she faces this insane and hopeless situation, will become one of the greatest heroines in Czech history. Milada was born in 1901 into a middle-class family. Her childhood was filled with patriotism and deep admiration for the democratic ideals of Czechoslovakia's first president, Tomáš Masaryk. But it was also marked by tragedy. 2 of her 3 siblings died from scarlet fever. That unexpected loss is said to have sparked Milada's desire to focus on social issues. At first, she considered studying medicine, but her father, distrustful of doctors after the deaths of his children, convinces her that law would be a better choice. While studying at the law faculty, she meets Bohuslav Horák, who is 2 years older and a journalist at Czechoslovak radio. He becomes the pillar of her life. Alongside democratic ideals, he brings deep religious faith to her. Because of him, Milada even converts from Catholicism to the Evangelical Church. They marry right after graduation, and 6 years later, they have their only child, a daughter named Jana. Milada, now Horáková, immediately applies for a job at Prague City Hall, naturally in the Department of Social Welfare. She works tirelessly, rarely goes home, and according to colleagues, often skips lunch because of her workload. She contributes to the development of a massive complex of social institutions, known as the Masaryk homes in Karch, and takes a strong interest in women's issues. As a lawyer, she works on legislation aimed at improving the status of women in society. And thanks to this, she is first noticed by her idols, aging President Tomáš Masaryk, and later his successor, Edvard Beneš. When Hitler seizes Czech Sudetenland in September 1938, Horáková immediately gets involved in helping refugees from the occupied regions. And when the Nazis occupy the rest of the country in March 1939, she, just like her husband, naturally joins the resistance. A year later, however, both are betrayed and arrested by the Gestapo during a vacation at a guest house near Krudim. What exactly Milada endures during interrogation is something we can only guess. What's certain is that she's tortured to extract names of her collaborators. She's left with deep scars on her hands and lifelong spinal problems. But Milada only reveals names she knows the investigators already have. Once the Gestapo is done with her, she's sent to the concentration camp in Terezín. There, she selflessly helps out in the infirmary, and in 1944, she finally stands trial in Dresden. The prosecutor demands the death penalty, but due to lack of evidence, she's sentenced to 8 years in prison in Eikach near Munich. Fortunately, the war soon ends, bringing a moving reunion with her very ill husband, who also survived the concentration camps and a death march. The post-war years bring Milada into the highest levels of public life. She becomes chairwoman of the Council of Czechoslovak Women, vice chair of the Union of Political Prisoners, and at President Beneš's request, joins parliament as a member of the National Social Party. Incidentally, in 1947, she also founds the women's magazine Vlasta, which remains popular to this day. But the initial spirit of rebuilding soon turns into harsh reality. Milada sees the grip of the communists tightening across all areas of life, and she doesn't hesitate to protest. As early as 1947, the Horáks realize they are being watched by the communist-controlled state security. After the communist coup in February 1948, Horáková is stripped of all public roles. On March 10th, After hearing of the mysterious death of Foreign Minister Jan Masaryk, she resigns from parliament. The net is closing in. While many of her party colleagues flee into exile, she once again selflessly helps others escape, but she refuses to leave. On September 27th, state security comes to their Prague home. Milada isn't there, only her husband, their 15-year-old daughter Jana, and the housekeeper. Horak manages to escape through the garden in his slippers, hoping to warn her. But it's too late. She's already been arrested at her office. The two will never see each other again. In custody, everything repeats. Beatings, psychological torment. But this time, not from the Germans, but from her own people, from Czechs. For the first few months, Milada doesn't even know that the communists have arrested another 380 members of the National Social Party and are now deciding what to do with them. At first, Horáková isn't seen as anyone crucial. That changes when Soviet leader Stalin slams his fist and demands action. Opponents of the regime are already being executed in Bulgaria and Hungary, so why not in Czechoslovakia? Under the supervision of two Soviet advisors, Makarov and Likachov, it's decided that a show trial must be staged to scare all regime opponents. And at the head of this so-called anti-state conspiracy must be someone important, well-known, and popular. That it's a woman, all the better. On May 31st, 1950, the tragic theatre begins under the name Trial of the Sabotage Conspiracy Group against the Republic led by Milada Horáková, even though she has never even met some of the co-defendants before. It is the first fully staged trial in Czechoslovakia. Soviet advisors introduced so-called director's scripts, according to which interrogators rehearse the correct answers with prisoners over and over again. Horáková is said to have been hung upside down, beaten with a baton, or kept awake through entire nights. No deviation from the script is allowed. Even under these conditions, Milada Horáková presents herself with great courage.
Já jsem s únorem a s jeho provedením nesouhlasila. A postavila jsem se proti němu záporně.
At the same time, she tries to defend her ideals despite everything. But the prosecutors, reading from the script, start shouting and interrupting whenever anything unscripted is said.
To bychom byli, pane prokurátore, nepřipustili, kdybychom my do toho něco mluvili.
On top of it all, the court receives thousands of petitions demanding the death penalty for the traitors. A state-driven hysteria breaks out across the country, dragging in even children. The atmosphere is still scary today.
Opovrhujeme všichni těmito zrádci a jediná naše odpověď na jejich počínání je: zvýšíme bdělost a ostražitost, zvýšíme své úsilí, abychom v budování socialismu co nejrychleji pokračovali.
On June 8th, after 8 days in court, the verdicts are handed down. They are devastating. 5 long-term prison sentences, 4 life sentences, and 4 death sentences. Among them is Milada Horáková, the only woman sentenced to death in the Czech show trials. Outside of the Soviet Union and Albania, this never happened anywhere else. Horáková proudly refuses to ask for clemency, but her family does so on her behalf. Other appeals come from figures like Albert Einstein, Eleanor Roosevelt, and Winston Churchill. Communist President Gottwald, however, remains unmoved. On June 24th, all is decided. The 3 days Milada Horáková has left are spent reflecting on God and writing letters to her loved ones. Letters the authorities never deliver. Even her personal messages, which still move readers today, were seen as a threat and not handed over to her family until 1990. The day before the execution, a 20-minute visit is allowed from her sister Vera, her husband, and daughter Jana. It is only then that Milada learns what happened to her husband, that he tried to warn her and managed to escape to Germany. After midnight, she writes her final letter. Do not cry, do not grieve too much. This is better for me than dying slowly. My heart could no longer bear captivity. I go with my head held high. One must also know how to lose. that is no shame. Farewell. I am always and only yours. Milada.